All right, good morning, folks. So I've got a short update here on working smart with physical network analytics tied into maximizing your network overlay availability. This ties into an announcement that we made this morning about an IP management pack for vRealize operations. It's something that we've been working on that will be released in mid-December. So let me go through some of the challenges that we've seen in terms of managing physical networks, particularly in the data center, where a lot of the issues that come up, probably 90% of them are tied in with physical media, and they can be difficult to actually troubleshoot unless you have good tools in place. The other 10% are usually very transient issues, and something that we've put a lot of effort into beefing up the instrumentation that we have on the physical network. And so one of the things that we want to do as customers are starting to look at network virtualization is really make sure that this is visible in the right tools so that it's easy to get an understanding of the performance of the physical network while you're actually putting an overlay network in place, and then also making sure that it's easy to troubleshoot. So the physical network matters because it is the underlying infrastructure that you're actually putting your virtual networks on top of. We've had a lot of experience here in terms of putting the right instrumentation in place, both to handle and identify those physical, optical issues that I talked about earlier, and then also some of those transient issues that appear maybe where you've got a misbehaving VM, very difficult to actually troubleshoot, can take 3 to 4 weeks if you don't have the right tools in place. But if you have the right instrumentation, we've found, and we have a number of customers that can do that troubleshooting within 3 to 4 minutes. And it avoids a lot of delay in terms of getting involved with support, having to do support saves, and really drilling down to those issues much more rapidly. The other thing from a physical network perspective is that we believe it makes sense to put in place an actual fabric, put in place a network that is actually optimized and highly resilient for the data center, very good optimization for east-west traffic, and also ties in with very simple to actually deploy. That makes it easy to build out the physical network as you're also deploying virtual networks on top. So what we're doing here is really tying in our Ethernet fabric both to NSX, VXLAN-based networks with physical VTEP gateways, and then also tying the instrumentation of that fabric back up into vRealize Operations Manager and also Log Insight. What this is doing is giving you a visibility into that physical network as you're actually also managing the VXLAN network, the overlay network at the same time. It's a bit of a build out here. So more specifically with the IP pack for vRealize, what we've been doing, and you can see on the slide here some of the examples, we've been basically tying the base inventory of the switches for that fabric, giving the visibility of that topology up into VCOps, into vRealize Operations Manager. And then on top of the actual physical inventory, we're adding a lot of detailed instrumentation. So not just port health and port utilization, but tying in a lot of fabric vision instrumentation that ties in with correlating things like latency and congestion that happen when a VM is misbehaving. Something that's usually pretty difficult to actually troubleshoot and detect. So that information is also fed up into vRealize Manager. We're using and leveraging some of the latest capabilities in the 6.0 release that was announced this morning that's coming out in mid-December. And that ties into some of the best practices that we have around managing the physical network. So those best practices tie into things like the right thresholds to put in place, the right policies on those thresholds that can be very aggressive if you're actually trying to troubleshoot an issue, or they can be more conservative if everything's working fine and there's no actual issues that you're trying to detect at the time. So you put those policies in place for monitoring the fabric, those get pushed up into vRealize Manager, and we're tying those into best practices and recommended actions based on some of the experience that we've had with existing deployments, with customers deploying the fabric with just traditional VLANs. Now we're starting to see deployments with the fabric in place with a VXLAN network overlay on top. And one of the biggest issues is how do you get visibility when there are issues on that VXLAN side? So this is providing visibility into the physical network so that you get an understanding of what's happening there as you start deploying the network overlay. Little use case here that gives an illustration with a couple of early screenshots that we're still basically working on for the release in December. On the left-hand side, this is basically giving you visibility in vRealize Operations Manager of the inventory of the switches. You can see some of the IP addresses, just some of the status. Now we then tie that into the topology and are feeding the status of the switches into the health badges within vRealize Manager. And we're also looking at how the availability ties into the risk status, so that if, for example, an individual link goes down, you're not treating that as a critical condition because you've got redundancy across the fabric. And then lastly, we're also tying this into the utilization badge within vRealize Operations Manager. From an efficiency perspective on the fabric, unlike a traditional data center network that is optimized north-south with things like spanning tree running, where you can really only get an efficiency of up to about 65%, on these VCS fabrics you can get efficiencies of up to about 95%, particularly leveraging some of the trunking capability and the hashing algorithms, both at a physical layer 2 and a layer 3 level. We get a lot of utilization of those links, and we want to make sure that we can tie that up into the efficiency badges within vRealize Manager. So what we're showing here is just on the health side. I think if I click, we're showing a use case here where the health of an individual, of the overall system is actually going down. When you can then drill down into the performance information that we're showing, both for attributes of the switches and then also for attributes of the actual ports connecting all the switches together. In this example, we're just tracking and showing high utilization on the CPU of a couple of the switches. And then you can use that to then drill down, figure out the load that is on the individual switch, and then take actions in terms of either remediation, changing the settings, or even building out additional switches into the fabric. Something that we make very easy, because as you introduce a switch, tie in the physical cabling, the switch becomes and adopts the configuration of the overall fabric very easily, so you can build out the physical network at the same time as you're building out your VXLAN network. The other thing that we're doing is also doing a content pack on the IP side into Log Insight. So that takes in all of your syslog messages, your logs, into Log Insight, starts to give you a picture there of all the logs tied in to the performance of your network. And within Log Insight, you can tie that into the servers and the VMs that are actually running there, and quickly identify, from a logging perspective, any of the issues that are actually happening on the network as well. So, just to reiterate, we've announced an IP management pack for vRealize Operations Manager and a content pack for Log Insight 2.0. These will be coming out in mid-December. Come over to the booth. We'd like to give you some more background about the actual management packs that we're doing. And then also, we're really interested in conversations around where do we need to take this from a roadmap perspective, tying in better correlation of that overlay network with the physical network. Thank you.